You wake up shivering. Your muscles coil tight against the biting air. You feel the deep, hollow ache of hunger demanding calories that you must chase down on foot. For roughly 300,000 years, this wasn't a hypothetical morning routine. This was the brutal, everyday filter that decided exactly who survived to pass on their genes. But today, your biggest physical threat is a missed alarm and a lukewarm coffee. We built a world of padded comfort. We convinced ourselves that human evolution simply stopped the day we invented the plow. But evolution never stops. It merely changes direction. What if we had never built those padded walls? What if we never domesticated the wheat, the cows, and eventually ourselves? Imagine an alternate timeline where the wild never ended. You wouldn't evolve into a frail, gray-skinned alien with a giant bald head. You would become a biological tank, built for endurance, built for impact. What would your body look like today if we kept evolving like ancient humans? Look down at your hands. Wiggle your fingers. They are delicate instruments designed for typing, scrolling, and gentle manipulation. They are fragile. Do you think these hands could strangle a wild predator? If we kept evolving under the pressures of the Pleistocene epoch, your skeleton would be terrifyingly robust. Anthropologist Colin Shaw from Cambridge University compared the skeletons of modern humans to those of our ancient hunting ancestors. The results were completely humbling. Shaw found that the average prehistoric hunter-gatherer had the bone density and leg strength of a modern elite cross-country runner. But they weren't just running for sport. They were running for their lives. To understand this physical transformation, we have to look at trabecular bone. This is the spongy, honeycomb-like bone tissue found at the ends of your long bones and inside your joints. In your body today, this bone is relatively thin and highly porous. If you trip and fall hard on concrete, your wrist will snap. But if we kept evolving like ancient humans, carrying heavy animal carcasses across uneven terrain and wrestling large prey down to the dirt, your bones would look completely different. Your trabecular bone would be packed incredibly dense, adapting to constant, severe physical trauma. We see this in the fossil record. At the Cima de los Huesos, or Pit of Bones, in the Atapuerca Mountains of Spain, archaeologists uncovered the remains of ancient human relatives. Their skeletons tell a story of absolute physical punishment. They lived hard. They died young. They survived impacts that would instantly shatter a modern femur. They endured. Could your modern skeleton survive a single day of their routine? You would be shorter, stockier, and substantially heavier. Your joints would be armored shock absorbers. You wouldn't be tall and slender. You would be a compact engine of survival. In the modern world, we think taller is always better. In the wild, tall means fragile. Tall means you require more calories just to keep your organs functioning. Evolution in the harsh, prehistoric world favored brutal efficiency and unbreakable mechanics over height. Now, touch your forehead. Feel the shape of your skull. Pop culture tells us that as humans evolve, our brains will just keep getting bigger and bigger. We picture highly advanced humans from the future with massive, bulbous heads and tiny bodies. This is entirely wrong. In fact, over the last 20,000 years, your brain has been rapidly shrinking. Anthropologist John Hawks has extensively studied the fossil record of human skulls to map this exact trend. He discovered a shocking truth about our evolutionary trajectory. The brains of ancient humans, like the cro-magnons who painted the breathtaking animal murals on the walls of Chauvet Cave in France 30,000 years ago, were roughly 10% larger than your brain today. That is a chunk of brain tissue roughly the size of a tennis ball that we have completely lost. Why did we lose it? Because we invented society.
We outsourced our survival to the group. You do not need to memorize the exact location of every freshwater source within a 50-mile radius. You do not need to know the toxic properties of 200 different plants. You do not need an internal, hyper-accurate GPS to track a wounded elk through a blinding blizzard. You just go to the grocery store. Our shrinking brains are a symptom of self-domestication. Just as a domestic dog has a smaller brain than a wild wolf, we have smaller brains than our wild ancestors. We became tame. We became dependent. What happens if we reverse that process? Let's reconstruct a day in this alternate timeline. You're walking through a dense, primeval forest. The canopy blocks out the sun. You have been tracking a herd of wild horses for 3 days, reading broken twigs and crushed leaves like a printed map. You hold the entire landscape in your head. In this world, your brain would remain massive, requiring up to 25% of your daily calories just to function. You would possess a working memory that would make a modern genius look absent-minded. You would be hyper-aware. You would be hyper-vigilant. Do you think your modern, screen-addicted brain could process that much raw sensory data without breaking down? If we kept evolving like ancient humans, natural selection would aggressively favor those who could predict weather patterns from the subtle shift in the wind's smell. Your brain wouldn't be optimized for reading text on a glowing screen. It would be an apex predator's supercomputer. Next, look in the mirror. Open your mouth. Chances are your teeth are a little crowded. Maybe you had your wisdom teeth removed when you were a teenager. Maybe you wore braces for years. We treat this as a perfectly normal part of growing up. It is not normal. It is a biological crisis. Dental anthropologist Peter Unger has spent his career examining the teeth of our ancient ancestors and comparing them to modern mouths. He found that prehistoric humans almost never had crooked teeth. Their teeth were straight, perfectly aligned, and heavily worn down. This is because bone is a living tissue that responds directly to mechanical stress. When you chew tough, fibrous foods, your jawbone grows wider and thicker to handle the load.
Today, we eat mush. We eat boiled grains, soft bread, and heavily processed meat. Because our diet is incredibly soft, our jaws simply do not grow to their full genetic potential. They remain small and narrow. But our teeth are still genetically programmed to be the exact same size they were 100,000 years ago. The result is a painful traffic jam in your mouth. If we had never adopted soft agricultural diets, your face would look vastly different. You would have a broad, heavily muscled jawline. Your masseter muscles, the thick muscles you use to chew, would bulge visibly on the sides of your head. Your wisdom teeth would emerge perfectly, serving as essential tools for grinding down raw roots and dried meat. You would have a face built for absolute function, not for modern aesthetic standards. Would you trade your modern smile for a jaw that never needed a dentist? Here is the counterintuitive twist that changes everything you know about human history. We look at the invention of agriculture as our greatest triumph. We think farming saved us from the brutal state of nature. But from an evolutionary standpoint, agriculture was a massive trap. When we settled down to farm, we traded our individual physical quality of life for sheer population numbers. The archaeological record proves this definitively. At the Dixon Mound site in Illinois, biological anthropologist Alan Goodman examined the skeletons of native populations before and after they adopted maize agriculture. The hunter-gatherers who lived there first were tall, robust, and generally free of infectious disease. But the farmers who came later, their bones were riddled with horrifying signs of malnutrition. They had severe iron deficiency. They had rampant, agonizing dental infections. They died much younger.
Farming forced humans to live close together in massive, stationary numbers. This proximity to each other, to domesticated livestock, and to our own accumulated waste created the perfect breeding ground for disease. Cholera, smallpox, tuberculosis. These were not ancient hunter-gatherer diseases. These were the biological penalties of civilization. If we kept evolving like ancient humans, remaining nomadic and living in small, sparse tribes, we would never have experienced these catastrophic plagues. Your immune system would be incredibly calibrated. You would carry a microbiome teeming with thousands of diverse bacteria, protecting you from the autoimmune diseases and severe allergies that plague modern society today. You would be tough, resilient, and deeply connected to the dirt. You would live a shorter life, perhaps ending violently, but while you lived, your body would operate at absolute peak biological harmony. We are animals that built a zoo, locked ourselves inside, and forgot we were ever wild. Every chronic pain you feel today is a ghost of our evolutionary past. Your lower back aches because your spine evolved to carry you dynamically over miles of uneven ground, not to compress in an office chair for 9 hours a day. Your anxiety spikes because your adrenal system evolved to flood your body with cortisol to help you escape a leaping predator, not to deal with an overdue credit card bill. Your body is constantly preparing for a physical fight that never actually comes. You are wearing a high-performance survival suit in a world padded with soft foam. Think about the modern gym. We actually have to invent heavy metal objects, drive to a special building, and lift them up and down repeatedly just to trick our bodies into not deteriorating. We have to artificially simulate the struggle of ancient life just to maintain our baseline health. We are paying money for the privilege of artificial hardship. If we had kept evolving like ancient humans, your entire life would be the workout. Your environment would sculpt you relentlessly from the moment you were born. There would be no gyms. There would be no fad diets. There would only be the brutal, beautiful mathematics of survival. You would not be a soft, domesticated creature waiting for the weekend. You would be a highly tuned instrument of nature. You wake up shivering,